Good evening. I'm Michael Loomis, joining you here on this Tuesday evening, February 24th, 2026. I believe this is day 7 of me making a new habit out of broadcasting live here on YouTube. Just getting back to doing broadcasting like I used to do many years ago, back when I was on the internet, had my own internet radio station. And, why am I doing this? Well, because number one, I do want to leave a place where my future generations can come back and see who I was, turn on some YouTube and watch Grandpa, if you will. But also just because I need to practice. And, currently I am a student, and this broadcast that I'm doing right now is actually labeled "The Student is In." And the idea is like with, I think it was Lucy on in the Peanuts cartoons, like Charlie Brown, how she sat in a booth that was said, like, the doctor is in, and psychiatric help 5 cents. Uh, I I I look at this as a medium and a way to be able to teach, be able to communicate, even be able to help people. And currently, I am a student. I do go to Arizona State University. I do their online program because, quite frankly, it's really no different than going to school in person these days. If you are used to the Canvas learning platform, the learning software, you'll know what I'm talking about. They all look the same, whether you're in person or not. The Really, what makes the big difference is if you are a self-driven, self-taught, self-learning individual, it makes very little difference. Now, don't get me wrong. I did go to Long Beach City College for a number of years, and I really did enjoy and appreciate an in-student experience. And I will, once I'm done with all of the degrees I need to get to, I don't know, I plan on being a lifetime student. I like to study. I like to learn. I like to give myself a larger platform of language by which to communicate to others by. And as some of you that are watching know, my degree pathway is applied nutrition and health. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go with my graduate degree, whether it be medical nutrition or the idea of a doctor of behavioral health. Primarily because as I study nutrition and health, I come from a place I think a lot of people do when they start making dietary changes in their life, and they start to see the positive effects of, doing things that are more natural and more healthful for their bodies. Uh, and for most people, once they get to that point where they start eating the right kinds of foods, they're also making other behavioral decisions that are more healthy. Like, they're not only are they improving the quality of foods that they're eating, but they're also stopping things like drinking or smoking or chewing tobacco or doing drugs. And so it's not just a matter of saying, aha, see, I started, eating a vegetarian diet, and all of a sudden I'm looking and feeling better. Yeah, I mean, if you eat a cleaner diet made of whole foods that are made up of, mostly vegetable based foods, guess what? You're going to feel better. Now, if you cut out the drinking, smoking, drugs, and um, you're going to feel better even more so. And then if you start exercising, well, guess what? That's going to make you feel better too. And if you then start focusing on your sleep and your sleep patterns, better yet. And so it's really hard to tell, especially with studies like when you're reading studies and they're using people who are self-reporting what it is that they're changing in life. It's it's really kind of hard to tell what it is ultimately that is making the improvement, especially when you start doing things. I mean, you'd have to literally put somebody inside of a laboratory and lock them in to make very definitive, um, to collect really very definitive findings about somebody. You'd have to treat them like a lab rat, and that's just not something we do. But nonetheless, if you are doing things to actively improve the quality of your life, guess what? You're going to feel better. But anyways, one of the struggles I've had to deal with is having grown up, being born in the 1970s, lived through the 80s, the 90s, versus the last, 10, especially the last 10 or 15 years, um, is the shape of our human bodies, especially here in America, um, have been changing quite a bit. The body mass index of a lot of our people in society has been increasing significantly over time. And, you can see this in pictures that were taken at the beaches back in the 1970s, where you wouldn't see one obese person ever in any of these pictures. It's like they didn't exist. It's like, you know, and there used to be a term, you know, what is it? It isn't over until the fat lady sings. Hold on. Until the fat lady sings. Um, it ain't over till the fat lady sings. It's a saying that means you shouldn't assume the outcome of a situation until it's completely finished. It emphasizes that things can still change even if it seems like the end is near. It ain't over till the fat lady sings. I mean, that term it's kind of funny because now there's not a whole lot of relevance to it when you have a whole lot of fat ladies everywhere, if you will. Um, when I was a kid, there was this idea you go to, the carnival, you can go to the circus, and they'd have a fat lady. Why? Because it was a rarity. You didn't see people that were morbidly obese that were 500 pounds or above, and now it's not uncommon. So basically, what I'm saying is there's a shift that has taken place in our world where the body mass index of people has shifted dramatically. I mean, even when I go to the gym, I first started going to 24-hour fitness back in 1997, and you really didn't see very many people that were even overweight at the gym. And yeah, there were some people that were a tad bit overweight, but none, but barely any of them would be obese, and rarely morbidly obese. But now when you go to the gym, it's a different story altogether, and it's almost become what I would say is acceptable and assumed, I don't know, as normal. And even if you went back to let's say go back to 1997 when I started at the gym, people went to the gym and yeah, gosh, it was rare that any of them ever even wore makeup. Number one, if it, men or women, um, and the women certainly didn't dress in clothing that was very revealing, because they're there to work out. And now when you go to the gym, you see a lot more skin on women and the way they dress, and it's like, holy mackerel. Um, it's like they're putting themselves on display for some reason. Are they doing it for men? There may be certain men that they want to have look at them, but I think for the most part, the majority of the guys that are in the gym that would be staring at them, they probably don't want that attention. But the reality is, if you don't want that attention, then don't dress like that. Um, but even now, women that are obese are dressing this way, and as and just showing off parts of their bodies that even 15, 20 years ago they wouldn't have been. And it's a little bit strange for me at 53 years of age. But you see, my point in bringing this up is because it's not just a matter of we're eating differently. That has a lot to do with it, because the only way you're going to go from being an average weight or it within that normal body mass index window to beyond that into the obese category or the morbidly obese category is to be consuming a surplus amount of calories. Can inflammation play into it some? Yes, obviously, if you know much of anything about science or medicine. Um, but and the only way you're going to lose weight is if you are in what's called calorie deficit. And it appears to me that there's more at play here than simply trying to convince people to eat less or eat better, because you can talk about it all day long and they can hear it and they can acknowledge it and they can do this. But if they're going home and they're going to the stores and they're buying snack foods, and mind you, I I I highly suggest not buying snack foods. I think snack foods are of the devil, and that they are probably one of the number one things that are contributing to our midsections growing disproportionately to our height. And even if you are going to have snack foods, at least make them whole foods, single ingredients, fruit, carrots if you need to, maybe some macadamia nuts, walnuts, or pecans. You want to stay away from any of the nuts that are higher in oxalate, pecans, almonds, peanuts. Uh, but just try to avoid ever even having a snack. If you can limit your nutrient intake to, say, 2 meals a day, or if you have to, 3 meals a day. Uh, that's going to do your body a whole lot of good. And if you can get all of your eating done before the sun goes down, even better. But from and this is just kind of a side note. From what I understand, uh, Dr. Walter Longo, who is a professor and an author, he wrote the book The Longevity Diet, and he is a professor of aging at the University of Southern California, and he he knows an awful lot about diet, and I highly recommend his book, The Longevity Diet. And he is the one that would suggest that probably the best eating window is to eat during your waking hours, but then the timing of the break of the fast that you're going to want to take, what we would call, like, say, a fasting mimicking diet, uh, would be a 12-hour, like 12 and 12 eating schedule. Some people, they they like to do what they call intermediate fasting, which they define that as eating during a and like an 8-hour period of the day, and then not eating for 16. Uh, it would seem that there are some health benefits to limiting that time away from food, especially fat, to 12 hours a day. And I don't, that information is available out there if you want to look it up. I highly recommend that because it's better that you learn the information than just have somebody feeding it to you like me. Um, but, just realize that, ultimately, if you are somebody that's going to want to make some changes, it's going to be difficult, and you're going to run into a lot of problems up here that are going to get in the way between you and you achieving your goals. And that brings me back to my point of why I'm going to school, and what is the purpose of my going to school: to get an undergraduate degree in applied nutrition and health, then a graduate degree in, say, medical nutrition, possibly a doctorate in behavioral health. And the reason why is because I see that there is a behavioral component that is interfering with people's ability to make the best decision, even in the presence of the correct knowledge that they do have in their head. What is that component? In one large way, I would suggest it is addiction, and that their snacking choices are feeding into an addictive cycle that they don't really even realize they have, because it is simply them eating, which they think, well, everybody has to eat. And they may not understand or realize that they actually have an eating problem if they can't control their behavior around eating. Okay. Do they have a mental health crisis disorder that's in play with this? Some people would say that they do. I would even go so far as to suggest that, our world, if we're going to help people better understand where they're at in relationship to food, that they would need to and benefit greatly by having some kind of program like an Alcoholics Anonymous, but for snacks, like Snackaholics Anonymous. Um, because And the question is, where does the problem start? Does it start with the food, or does it start with the behavior? And it's kind of like the whole idea of Cerberus, of a snake eating its tail. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? And when it comes to behavioral or mental disorders that would require medication by a psychiatric doctor, the question is, why do they need a medication? And if that medication is improving their situation, what is it that the medication is interfering with that would make their mind make the better decisions when it comes to eating healthy? Now, there are obviously dietary aids that interfere with hunger mechanisms. Ghrelin is um, the chemical that your body releases that tells you, "Grr, you're hungry." And that's how I remember it. The ghrelin. It's your tumbly being grumbly. And then the other one is leptin, and that is where your body sends a signal saying you're satisfied, you're happy. Uh, and I really want to figure out what it is that is making people or guiding people's decisions. Whether it's just slick marketing by the food companies that are making packaging the way that they do, looks the packaging that looks the way that it does, marketing and advertising that somehow gets you to want to not only remember those brands of food when you go to the store and you see them, but then you want to buy them, and then you want to consume them. And they're snack foods, so they're always in small enough amounts where it just barely satisfies you enough, so that what do you want to do? But an hour later, you want to go back and say, "Oh, I want some more." And that's not good, especially if you are in a workplace, for example, that has a cabinet full of snack foods or a machine full of snack foods that are available for you, because you're going to be blowing through a bunch of empty calories, full of and hyper processed foods that are something that your body doesn't even recognize as a food specifically. And they're, depending on what it is you are eating and how you're eating it and how it's prepared, there is uh, a process within your body called digestive leukocytosis, which is a when your immune system sets off into circulation a bunch of leukocytes, in other words, a bunch of white blood cells, soldiers within your immune system, that says, be on alert. There's something entering into the body that is not in its natural state as Mother Nature created it. The foods that do this the least are like fruit. Like if you ate an orange or an apple or a banana, that's going to trigger digestive leukocytosis the least. Foods that have been denatured or fermented or cooked are going to make your body release more of these leukocytes. Now, it's not causing your body to create more leukocytes, as in you have a pathology. It's just telling the leukocytes that are in the fluid and in your circulation to be at attention like good soldiers, that some things come into the body that I don't quite recognize. And when they get there and they say, "Hey, it's just food," okay, go ahead and go back to playing backgammon or whatever. You're free to move about the cabin freely, if you will, and everything's going to be good. But however, if it's a very irritating food that is hyper or ultra processed, your body might interpret that as a a crisis and attack accordingly. And it's probably not gonna happen if you eat a whole food diet for years and years and years, and then you have like one bag of Cheetos. No, I'm talking about chronic overeating of Cheetos or drinking Slurpees or eating the way a lot of people do, the kinds of foods that come wrapped in paper or plastic that you would buy in the middle of the store versus whole foods. And I believe those are the people that you see now everywhere and or at the gym or at the beach that are overweight, obese, morbidly obese. And so again, just kind of going back to where I want to go with my education is I realize the fact that it's the food that has gone into the body that has changed the metabolic functioning of the human body, which in turn affects and changes the chemistry of the human body, which then can have a great effect on how your mind's chemistry works up here, which then affects the way you are interacting with life emotionally, which then can in turn affect what it is you're putting in here. Because if you're putting a food in here that you would call a comfort food, it's because you're trying to make yourself go from feeling bad to feeling better. And if you associate the eating of that food that's not healthy with feeling better, then you're just constantly feeding into a cycle of dysregulation that's going to take you further down a road that you don't want to go. So, anyways, those are my thoughts for today. Uh, I really like this idea of being a student, and I really do want to help people better understand how their body works. I want to help them realize that they're not in this alone. And, maybe I can somehow help them out with, some suggestions or at least pointing them in the right direction or just be here in support of them while I'm in school and, hang up my sign from time to time where, I say the student is in, I'll gladly give you my 2 cents worth. Anyways, that's it. I'm going to check out for tonight. It's been about a half an hour now. And I will see you tomorrow back here on Chew Digest, my daily diaries of what it is I've been chewing on. And I didn't even get to talk about what I was thinking about today while walking around. Um, one of the things I heard, I was listening to an interview with the CEO of Uber, who was on the podcast, who was on the YouTube program podcast interview with a diary of a CEO, and that was a really good interview because I used to do Uber driving, and one of these days I'm actually going to have a a program that I'm going to dedicate to this idea of why you should hire a successful Uber driver. one that was driving, say, between the years of 2016 and 2023, back when Uber driving was quite a bit different than it is now. Now it's just it's a it's a crap show, and you can't make hardly any money doing it. And I know people like to think that they can, and I don't think they realize that no matter how hard they're trying these days, they're out there making half or one third of the amount of money we used to make. But there were other factors involved other than simply being able to make more money. There were strategies you could use that it was cool. I mean, it was like playing a strategy game, if you will, and so it was fulfilling. It was almost addictive. Uh, I enjoyed it. I made good money doing it, and it gave me a lot of freedom to enjoy being able to stop and go have lunch with my kids, pick them up, drop them off at school, all those things that parents can enjoy. And anyways, I will see you tomorrow. In the meantime, have a good night. Uh, get some rest, get some good sleep, and I will see you tomorrow, day 8.